Let's see how we would configure cost. We've already got a few costs within this project, but what I'll do is I'll create a new one. So first and foremost, I have my list of costs and I'm going to add a new cost. So what I need to do here is select any event and we'll go through the options that we have. So let's do a fraud check event, for example. So we define a fraud check event now. What we can say is our fraud check event has a specific amount. Every time we run a fraud check, it costs us $1.27. We can also specify that we have this data as an input field. So if we have some field that has the cost of a fraud check step in our data set, I can define that and we'll source that data indirectly. So you can imagine if you have costs for certain events and not for others, you can define that here, and you can either estimate it or define it as amount from an attribute. You can also bring in relational costing via a lookup table. So let's say you have some table in your cost accounting system that allows you to define when we do a fraud check with a certain service, it costs us X, and with another service, it costs us Y. We can upload that data directly here into the relational cost model and use that lookup table to do costing. So we can get very granular, detailed costs. Now, if we're not going to say that this has a fixed cost, but it maybe has a time variable cost, and you can have both, these are not mutually exclusive. We can have fixed and/or time variables for any given event. But if I want to define a time-based cost in this example, I define my event, then I define how we calculate the time that the task is open. So, do I have a second timestamp attribute within my data file? I don't have that within this specific data input, but I can define the amount of time it takes for us to get from a fraud check to a specific second timestamp. A task start, task end. That's the clock for the fraud check event. Or, how long does it take us to get from the fraud check to any downstream event? We should stop the clock as soon as we get to any second stage. Or the third option being, do we have the ability to specify a specific event? So the time that it takes us to go from a fraud check to any downstream event that we can pick out of this list is the amount of time that we should use to calculate the cost for that. Now for this example, I'll just say any subsequent event, and then you have the exact same three options available to you. Except this is going to be hourly. So how much are we paying per hour for us to go from a fraud check to any subsequent event? And let's just put in any kind of a value. Alright, and that's going to do that calculation on an hourly basis. And then you obviously also have that same option to be able to specify from an attribute in a file or a specific lookup table. As soon as I define my cost, I then save it. As soon as I do that, I can then calculate and save. And each time I do that, it's going to run the calculations and modify the costs accordingly. So one of the nice things here is we don't have to have very detailed information for our costs input. At least at first. We can do a nice high-level estimation as to how costly it is to execute any given event that takes place as part of our process. And we're not using this for a very low-level kind of second decimal point detailed analysis. We're simply using it for that comparative analysis that we saw in the path view, and also along our upper bounds, looking at metrics and comparing sets based on the cost of those. Through this, we can really start to get a high-level understanding of where cost is being incurred and where we should focus our efforts in driving costs out of the process.